What happens when XJ9, a powerful robot with a human-like soul, suddenly enters the world of My Hero Academia? After arriving in Musutafu through a mysterious dimensional portal, Jenny quickly discovers that this world is filled with heroes, villains, and people with extraordinary abilities. But the Hero Public Safety Commission sees her differently. They see a powerful machine that could become a dangerous threat. With Midoriya and All Might trying to protect her, Jenny must prove that being made of metal doesn't mean she isn't a person. Can a robot become a true hero in a world built around quirks? Let's begin. The sky over Musutafu did not break with a thunderclap, but with the shrill, digital scream of reality being folded like parchment. At Dagobah Municipal Beach Park, the morning air was usually thick with the scent of salt and the rust of abandoned refrigerators. But today, it was ionized, smelling of ozone and scorched silicon. A sphere of cerulean light expanded for a heartbeat, carving a perfect semicircular crater into the shoreline before imploding. When the dust settled, there was no monster, no villain, and no meteor. There was only a girl, or the shape of one, kneeling in the center of the glassed sand. She was composed of sleek, cerulean and white plates of a metal that didn't exist on any periodic table, her pigtails shaped like cooling vents, and her eyes glowing with the steady, artificial hum of a high-end motherboard. Izuku Midoriya, his hands raw from hauling a rusted truck chassis across the sand, stood frozen. Beside him, Toshinori Yagi, the skeletal form of the symbol of peace, coughed into his hand, his sunken eyes wide with a rare, uncalculated shock. "Young Midoriya," All Might wheezed. "Stay back. That didn't look like a quirk-related warp." The robot girl's head tilted with a series of hydraulic whirs. Her optical sensors shuddered, zooming in on the two figures. To her internal HUD, the world was a cascade of data. She saw the structural integrity of the trash heaps, the atmospheric composition of this strange Earth, and the erratic, fading energy signature radiating from the tall, thin man. She stood up, her joints moving with a fluid grace that defied mechanical physics. "Query," she said, her voice clear, youthful, and laced with a very human-sounding frustration. "Is this still the Milky Way? Because if Vexus sent me to the Andromeda Galaxy, my mom is going to absolutely lose her circuits." Izuku took a step forward, his hero-fanatic brain already whirring. A transformation quirk? No, your energy signature? It's entirely internal. Are you a support item? A sentient AI? The girl sighed, a sound produced by a simulated vocal processor that perfectly mimicked the exasperation of a 16-year-old. "I'm XJ9, but you can call me Jenny, and I'm not an item. I'm a global response unit." She looked around at the piles of trash, her sensors detecting the filth and decay. "And apparently, I'm in a landfill. Great. Just great." Before Izuku could offer a hand, the sound of sirens cut through the morning air. Not the standard police sirens, but the heavy rhythmic thrum of the Hero Public Safety Commission's tactical response units. They had detected the dimensional rift from their satellites. Within moments, black armored SUVs crested the dunes, and several pro-heroes, lower-ranked but efficient, leaped from the vehicles, their hands glowing with various elemental powers. "Don't move," one shouted, a man whose arms had transformed into heavy stone pillars. "Identify your quirk and your license, or you will be neutralized as a rogue technological threat." Jenny's pigtails flattened against her head, a defensive reflex. "Neutralized? Pal, I just got here. I don't even know where here is." If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in, down in the comments below. The spice must flow. The HPSC agents didn't wait for a dialogue. In a world where 80% of the population possessed biological superpowers, a mechanical entity of this complexity was seen as one of two things: a weapon of mass destruction or a stolen piece of experimental tech. The stone-armed hero lunged, swinging a fist that could shatter a building. Jenny didn't flinch. She didn't even adopt a combat stance. In a blur of motion too fast for the human eye to track, her right hand retracted into her forearm, replaced by a massive, vibrating pneumatic hammer. She caught the hero's fist with her left hand, metal meeting stone with a bone-jarring crack, and held him stationary. The sheer strength required to stop a momentum-based quirk of that magnitude was staggering. All Might's eyes narrowed. This wasn't just machinery, It was something that operated on a level of power that rivaled the top tiers of the hero billboard chart. "I really don't want to hurt you," Jenny said, her chest plates shifting as her internal cooling fans kicked into high gear. "But I've had a really long day, and my internal sensors are telling me your quirk is about to break your own wrist if you keep pushing against my stabilizers." "Enough!" All Might stepped forward, his voice regaining some of its authoritative boom despite his frail form. "She is not an aggressor. Look at her eyes. There is no malice there, only confusion." The agents hesitated, recognizing the man even in his diminished state. But the HPSC was not the police. They were a bureaucracy of control. A woman in a sharp suit stepped from the lead vehicle, her eyes fixed on Jenny with a predatory interest. "Mr. Yagi, you are in no position to dictate protocol. This entity is a clear violation of the QuirkTech Integration Act. It is unregistered, sentient machinery. It is, by definition, an illegal artifact." Jenny released the hero's stone fist, her hammer arm sliding back into a normal hand. "Illegal artifact? I'm a person. Well, a robot person. I go to high school. I have a curfew. I have a distressingly large collection of vintage digital music." Izuku watched the interaction, his mind racing. He saw the way the HPSC woman looked at Jenny, not as a girl, but as a prize. In this society, quirkless people were bottom tier, and machines were tools. A machine that could think, feel, and outclass a pro hero was a threat to the entire social order. If the commission took her, she wouldn't be going to a school, she'd be going to a laboratory for dissection. "She's a student," Izuku blurted out, stepping between the commission and Jenny. He didn't know why he said it, other than the desperate need to protect someone who looked so much like a victim of circumstance. She's an exchange student from a private research institute in the States. Principal Nezu of UA High School was expecting her." The lie hung in the salt-heavy air. All Might looked at Midoriya, then at the girl, then at the commission. He knew Nezu. The Chimera principal loved two things: tea and variables that disrupted the status quo. A sentient robot was the ultimate variable. "Is this true?" the commission agent asked, her voice cold. "We received no filing for a mechanical transfer. Nezu keeps his secrets close," All Might lied, his grin returning, though it looked strained. "I was sent here to escort her personally. My apologies for the theatrical arrival. Dimension folding technology is still a bit finicky. Wouldn't you agree?" Jenny looked at the boy with the green hair. Her internal lie detector was pinging at maximum volume, but her social integration subroutines told her that these HPSC people were bad news. She tucked a strand of metallic hair behind a robotic ear and nodded. "Yeah, what he said. I'm a student. XJ9, Jenny Wakeman, reporting for hero training?" The tension didn't vanish, but it shifted. The commission couldn't openly challenge All Might and UA without a direct order from the top. The agent signaled her men to stand down, but she didn't look away from Jenny. "We will be verifying this with UA. If there is a single discrepancy in her registration, she will be seized and decommissioned. Do I make myself clear?" As the SUVs peeled away, Jenny let out a long mechanical vent of air. She turned to Izuku. "Thanks, kid. You've got a lot of sparks. But now I think I actually have to go to school. Is it hard? Do they have a lot of pop quizzes?" "Because I'm really bad at history, mostly because I haven't lived through yours yet." Izuku stared at her, his heart hammering against his ribs. He had just lied to the government for a robot from another dimension. He looked at the vast, glittering expanse of the ocean, the sun catching the blue plates of Jenny's armor. "Welcome to UA," he whispered. It's going to be a lot more than just quizzes." The journey had begun. Not in a lab, but on a beach of trash, where a boy with a borrowed power and a girl with a manufactured soul realized that the world of heroes was about to get a lot more complicated. The walk from Dagobah Beach to the gates of UA High School was a surreal procession through a world that felt both familiar and alien to XJ9. As they moved through the bustling streets of Musutafu, Jenny's internal processors were working overtime, cataloging the staggering biological diversity of the population. In her home dimension, she was the anomaly, the lone robot in a world of humans. Here, she saw a man with the head of a giant beetle, a woman whose hair was made of living vines, and a teenager floating 3 inches off the pavement. Everyone here has modifications? Jenny asked, her optical sensors sweeping the crowd. My internal database doesn't have names for these models. Is that guy's head actually a spray bottle? Those are quirks, Jenny, Izuku explained, walking slightly ahead to shield her from the more inquisitive stares of the public. About 80% of the population has them. It's just how we are born. But you're different. You're entirely artificial, aren't you? Jenny looked down at her hands, the blue plating shimmering under the morning sun. My mom, Dr. Nora Wakeman, built me to be the Earth's protector. I've got the strength of 1,070 men, weapons for every occasion, and a heart made of a multi-phase fusion core. But I even get acne when my oil filters get clogged. Being artificial never felt like it mattered back home. It matters here, All Might said quietly, his voice heavy. He was currently in his skinny form, wearing an oversized tracksuit to avoid recognition. Society here is built on the foundation of biological evolution. A machine that mimics humanity is a legal gray area. To some, you're a miracle. To the people in charge of the Hero Public Safety Commission, you're a liability that needs to be cataloged, controlled, and, if necessary, dismantled for parts. They reached the towering H-shaped structures of UA High School. The security gates hummed, scanning Jenny with a barrage of infrared and sonic sensors. Usually, the gates would flag any unauthorized technology, but as they approached, the barrier slid open with a welcoming chime. He's waiting for us, All Might muttered. They didn't go to a classroom. They were led deep into the heart of the administration wing, toward an office that smelled of expensive Earl Grey tea and old parchment. Behind a massive mahogany desk sat a creature that was neither dog, mouse, nor bear. Principal Nezu. Beside him stood the sharp-suited woman from the beach, Director Yokoyama of the HPSC, and two guards carrying high-frequency suppression batons. Ah, the guest of honor, Nezu chirped, his paws folded neatly. Do come in. XJ9, is it? Or do you prefer Jenny? I must say, your arrival has caused quite a spike in my morning data intake. A dimensional fold of that magnitude usually leaves a much larger footprint. Jenny took a seat, her servos whirring as she adjusted to the chair. Jenny is fine, and I didn't exactly plan the trip. Is it true what the green-haired kid said? You're going to let me stay here? Director Yokoyama stepped forward, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood. Let's be clear, Principal. This is not a student. This is a highly advanced, unregistered autonomous weapon system of unknown origin. Under the QuirkTech Integration Act, any sentient machinery found within Japanese borders must be surrendered to the HPSC for safety evaluation and strategic recoding. Strategic recoding? Jenny's eyes flashed a warning red for a split second. Is that the fancy way of saying you want to lobotomize me and turn me into a drone? It is the way of ensuring you don't decide to protect the world by enslaving it, Yokoyama retorted. You possess weaponry that exceeds the destructive capacity of most pro-heroes. Without a biological consciousness or a quirk factor to regulate your morality, you are a ticking time bomb. Nezu sipped his tea, his small, dark eyes twinkling with a terrifying intelligence. A fascinating perspective, Director. However, you are operating under an antiquated definition of biological. Tell me, Jenny, do you possess a central processing unit? I have a positronic brain, she answered. It's capable of billions of operations per second, but it's also capable of dreaming. I've spent the last 3 years of my life trying to figure out how to be a normal teenager while fighting off alien invasions. If that's not a consciousness, I don't know what is. Precisely, Nezu clapped his paws. Director, UA exists to nurture potential. We have students with sentient quirks, Dark Shadow, for instance. We have students whose bodies are made of inorganic materials. If I can teach a boy with an engine in his legs how to be a hero, why should I be barred from teaching a girl with a fusion core in her chest? Because he is human, Nezu. Yokoyama slammed a file onto the desk. This thing is property. It was manufactured. It has no rights, no citizenship, and no place in a school for children. The room grew cold. All Might stepped forward, his shadow looming over the director. I've seen humans with quirks who act like monsters, Director. And I've just seen this girl refuse to harm your agents even when they attacked her. If the HPSC takes her, you won't be evaluating a hero. You'll be strip mining a soul. Nezu stood up on his chair, his voice dropping an octave. Director Yokoyama, I have already filed the paperwork. I have designated XJ9 as a living support intelligence. This is a new legal classification I've been developing with the Ministry of Education for years. As of 10 minutes ago, she is under the direct guardianship of UA High School. If you wish to seize her, you will have to take it up with the Board of Directors, the Ministry, and, I suspect, the Court of Public Opinion when they find out the HPSC is trying to kidnap a girl who just saved a beach from a dimensional implosion. Yokoyama glared at the principal, then at Jenny. The silence was thick with the scent of ozone. She knew she had been outmaneuvered. Nezu's intellect was legendary. He played chess 12 moves ahead of everyone else. This isn't over, Yokoyama whispered, leaning in toward Jenny. A machine can be broken, XJ9. One malfunction, one accident, where your programming fails to protect a human, and I will have you on a pallet in 100 pieces. As the director and her guards marched out, Jenny let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Is everyone in this world that intense? I thought being a teenage robot was hard because of the cluster, not the government. Welcome to the Hero Society, Jenny, Nezu said, offering her a tiny cup of tea. It is a world of rigid boxes. People don't like it when something, or someone, doesn't fit. You are a variable that the world didn't calculate. That makes you dangerous to some, and a beacon of hope to others. So, what now? Jenny asked, looking at Midoriya. Now, Nezu smiled, we see if you can survive something much more terrifying than the HPSC. Class 1A, they're a rowdy bunch, but I suspect you'll find their modifications make you feel right at home. Midoriya, please escort our new living support intelligence to the dorms. She'll be starting her provisional hero course tomorrow. As they left the office, Jenny looked back at the small principal. She realized that while she was made of metal and wires, in this strange new world, her biggest challenge wouldn't be her hardware, it would be proving that she had the heart to be a hero in a society that only valued what was written in the blood. The heavy sliding door of Class 1A opened with a metallic groan that seemed to resonate with Jenny's own internal skeletal structure. Shota Aizawa, looking as though he had slept in a gutter and enjoyed it, shuffled to the front of the room. Behind him, XJ9 stood, her cerulean plating catching the fluorescent lights of the classroom. To the students of UA, she was a visual anomaly, too sleek to be a support item, too expressive to be a drone. Settle down, Aizawa droned, his yellow sleeping bag tucked under his arm like a discarded skin. We have a unique addition to the hero course. This is XJ9. She's part of a special exchange program authorized by Principal Nezu and the Ministry. Treat her like any other student, or don't. Just don't make a scene. The classroom exploded in a cacophony of voices. Is she a robot? Like, a real robot? Denki Kaminari leaned over his desk, his eyes wide. Can she play video games in her head? Does she have built-in Wi-Fi? Her design is incredibly streamlined, Momo Yaoyorozu noted, her analytical mind already trying to reverse engineer the alloy of Jenny's forearms. It doesn't look like any quirk-produced armor I've ever seen. Is it a transformation quirk? Tenya Ida stood up, his arm chopping the air with mechanical precision. Sir, with all due respect, the UA curriculum is designed for the cultivation of quirks. If this individual is entirely mechanical, how does she fit into the legal framework of the Hero Acts? Is she a citizen or a piece of equipment? Jenny flinched. The equipment comment hit her logic processors with a jagged edge. She stepped forward, her pigtails twitching with a soft whir. I'm a person, Four Eyes, and for the record, I've probably saved more people from giant space monsters than you've had hot meals. My name is Jenny. Space monsters? Katsuki Bakugo's voice cut through the chatter like a serrated blade. He was leaning back in his chair, his feet on the desk, sparks already dancing in his palms. Listen here, you overgrown toaster. I don't care what kind of special treatment you're getting from the rat principal. In this class, power is the only thing that matters. You look like a fancy toy for the support department to play with. You think you can stand in the same room as a real hero? Jenny's optical sensors turned a sharp neon red. A toy? You want to see power, Sparky? I could toss you into orbit before your brain even registers the G-force. That's enough, Aizawa said, his hair beginning to float as his quirk activated. He looked at Jenny, then at Bakugo. We're headed to Training Ground Beta. If you're so eager to test the equipment, Bakugo, you'll have your chance. We're doing a baseline combat assessment. The class moved to the locker rooms, but Jenny remained in the hallway, looking at the door. She didn't need to change. Her costume was her skin. She felt the weight of their stares, curiosity from Midoriya, suspicion from Todoroki, and open hostility from Bakugo. It was the same feeling she had back in Tremorton, that invisible wall between human and constructed. Even in a world where a boy could have engines in his calves or a girl could be made of invisible particles, Jenny felt like the only outsider. At Training Ground Beta, a simulated city block, the air was still. The students gathered around as Aizawa marked a perimeter. The exercise is simple, Aizawa explained. XJ9 against 3 of you. The goal is to touch the capture tape on her torso. Bakugo, Ida, and Kirishima. You're up. This is a test of mobility and reaction time. This is going to be a breeze, Kirishima said, hardening his skin until it looked like jagged rock. Just don't break on us, Jenny. I'd feel bad denting a girl. Don't worry about me, Rockhead, Jenny replied, her feet clicking as her internal stabilizers locked in. Worry about the pavement. The timer buzzed. Bakugo didn't wait. He propelled himself forward with a massive explosion, screaming as he closed the gap in a fraction of a second. Ida followed, his muffler quirk kicking into 3rd gear, creating a sonic blur. Kirishima charged head-on, acting as the tank. To the human eye, it was a coordinated pincer movement. To Jenny's combat readiness subroutines, it was happening in slow motion. Her processors partitioned her consciousness. One half analyzed the trajectory of Bakugo's heat signatures, while the other calculated the force needed to neutralize Ida without snapping his femur. As Bakugo reached out to grab the tape, Jenny didn't dodge. She transformed. Her torso elongated, her midsection becoming a flexible metallic coil that whipped her upper body out of the way. Simultaneously, her legs shifted into high-output thrusters. With a roar of blue flame, she vanished from their center. "Where is she?" Ida shouted, skidding to a halt. "Above you!" Jenny's voice rang out. She wasn't just flying, she was hovering with a precision no jetpack could match. Her arms had morphed into long, multi-jointed capture claws. She dived. Bakugo fired a blast upward, but Jenny deployed an energy shield from her palm, a shimmering translucent hexagon that absorbed the explosion without a scratch. She hit the ground with the force of a falling anvil, the shockwave knocking Kirishima off his feet. Before Ida could pivot, she used a localized gravity well generator in her chest to pull him toward her, then tapped his capture tape with a finger that had turned into a soft rubber mallet. "One," she chirped. Bakugo was livid. "Shut up! You're just a bunch of gadgets." He lunged again, his explosions becoming larger, more desperate. He was used to being the most explosive force in the room, but every time he swung, Jenny was somewhere else. She was faster than his eyes could follow, her body reshaping itself, expanding, shrinking, sprouting extra limbs to parry his blows. She caught Bakugo's wrist in midair. He tried to detonate, but Jenny's hand turned into a cryo sleeve, instantly frosting his palms and dampening the sweat that fueled his quirk. "Two," she said, tapping his tape. Kirishima tried to tackle her from behind, but Jenny simply grew a 3rd arm from her shoulder blades, caught him by the collar, and held him dangling 4 feet off the ground. He hacked at her arm with his hardened fists, but it was like hitting a diamond-encrusted mountain. "And 3, Jenny finished, tapping his chest. She released them and reverted to her standard teenage girl form. The silence in the training ground was absolute. The students of Class 1A had seen incredible quirks, but they had never seen a single entity move with that much versatility. There was no cooldown for her, no exhaustion, no biological limit. She's incredible," Midoriya whispered, scribbling furiously in a scorched notebook. "Her response time is nearly 0. It's not just a quirk, it's an entire arsenal, integrated into a single consciousness." Bakugo stood up, shaking the ice from his hands. His face was twisted in a mixture of rage and something that looked dangerously like fear. "You think you're better than us because you were built in a lab? You're just a machine. You don't have the guts to be a hero when things get real. You're just following code." Jenny's smile faded. She looked at her hands, the blue metal cool and unyielding. "You think being a hero is about guts, Bakugo? My code tells me to save people even if it means I get melted down into scrap. Can your guts do that?" Aizawa stepped forward. His eyes narrowed. He saw the rift forming. Jenny had proven her power, But in doing so, she had highlighted the very thing that would make her life at UA a nightmare. She was too powerful, too efficient. In a school designed to push humans to their limits, what do you do with a student who has no limits to push? Assessment over, Aizawa said. Go to the infirmary if you're bruised. Jenny, a word. As the class shuffled away, Jenny felt the victory tasting like copper in her mouth. She had won the fight, but as she looked at the scorched pavement and the retreating backs of her classmates, she realized that in this world of heroes, being the strongest didn't mean you belonged. It just meant you were the most dangerous thing in the room. The UA Sports Festival was not merely a school event. It was the modern world's substitute for the Olympic Games. A televised spectacle where the next generation of icons was forged in the crucible of public scrutiny. For Jenny, the stadium was a sensory nightmare. Her audio sensors were dialed down to 12% to prevent the roar of 100,000 spectators from overloading her central processor. From her vantage point on the starting line of the obstacle race, she could see the heat haze shimmering off the asphalt and the flicker of 1,000 smartphone cameras. "Welcome to the Lion's Den," Midoriya whispered beside her, his face pale, his breath coming in short, nervous hitches. "The whole world is watching, Jenny. Not just the heroes, but the scouts, the government, and the people who are afraid of us." Jenny's optics zoomed in on the VIP box. She didn't need a telescope to see Director Yokoyama of the HPSC sitting beside several high-ranking government officials. They weren't cheering. They were holding tablets, their pens poised like scalpels. "I'm used to crowds," Jenny said, her feet shifting as her internal servos primed for a high-output launch. "But usually, they're screaming because a giant monster is stepping on their cars. This feels different. It feels like I'm a specimen under a microscope." The buzzer sounded, a piercing electronic shriek that signaled the start. The initial bottleneck in the stadium tunnel was a chaotic mess of limbs and quirks. Todoroki froze the ground instantly, trapping dozens of students in a jagged sheet of ice. Jenny didn't even slow down. Her feet transformed into spiked, high-traction rollers, and she glided over the frozen surface with the effortless grace of a championship skater. When the first obstacles appeared, the massive, towering Robo-Infernos, the crowd gasped. To most students, these were insurmountable walls of steel. To Jenny, they were a joke. Her HUD identified their structural weak points in milliseconds. She didn't blast them, she moved through them. Transforming her right arm into a high-frequency vibrating blade, she spun like a blue and white dervish. She didn't just disable the robots, she carved them into perfect, symmetrical halves. As the massive machines toppled, the other students stared in awe. Even Todoroki, who had been leading the pack, glanced back with a furrowed brow. Jenny wasn't just competing, she was optimizing the course. "She's too fast." Present Mike's voice boomed over the speakers, crackling with excitement. "XJ9 is making short work of the obstacles. Is it even fair to call this a race? It's more like a scheduled demolition." But as Jenny reached the fall, the deep chasm with only tightropes for passage, she felt a strange hesitation in her logic gates. She could simply fly across. Her thrusters were more than capable of bypassing the entire challenge. But as she looked back, she saw Uraraka struggling, her face strained as she used her gravity quirk to lighten her load, and Ida, his brow slick with sweat as he carefully balanced on the wire. "If I just fly," Jenny thought, "am I even a student? Or am I just a cheat code?" She retracted her thrusters and stepped onto the wire, using her internal gyroscopes to maintain perfect balance. She wanted to win, but she wanted to win the way they did, through effort. However, her effort was still a calculation. She crossed the wire in seconds, her movements uncanny and jitter-free. By the time the final leg of the race arrived, the landmine field, Jenny was neck and neck with Bakugo and Todoroki. Bakugo was a blur of orange light and concussive sound, using his explosions to vault over the mines. Todoroki was sliding on a path of ice, neutralizing the sensors as he went. Jenny engaged her Lightfoot protocol, her sensors detecting the pressure plates beneath the dirt. She moved in a zigzag pattern, her speed increasing until she was a cerulean streak. But Midoriya was right behind them, dragging a piece of robot plating. Jenny watched through her rear-facing sensors as he gathered a cluster of mines, piled them up, and launched himself into the sky on a wave of fire and dirt. He soared over them, a desperate, human projectile, Jenny felt a surge of genuine admiration. He's risking his actual bones just to keep up, she realized. She could have engaged her afterburners and reclaimed the lead, but for a split second, she slowed. She wanted to see if he could do it. Midoriya slammed into the ground at the finish line, tumbling into first place. Jenny crossed a second later, followed by Todoroki and Bakugo. The stadium was silent for a heartbeat before erupting, but the cheers were mostly for Midoriya, the underdog, the boy who used his wits to beat the monsters. When Jenny's face appeared on the giant monitor for second place, the applause was polite, but tempered with a palpable unease. "She didn't even break a sweat," a voice muttered from the stands, picked up by Jenny's hypersensitive microphones. "Can you even call that a hero? It's just a machine doing what it was programmed to do." The words stung worse than any cluster laser. The festival moved into the cavalry battle. Jenny found herself teamed up with Mei Hatsume from the support department, who spent the entire preparation period trying to lick Jenny's armor to test the alloy, and a very confused Hitoshi Shinso. "You're the ultimate support item," Mei squealed, her goggles zooming in and out. "With your power and my babies, we'll be unstoppable." "Think of the marketing. XJ9. We could revolutionize the hero industry." "I'm not a baby, Mei," Jenny sighed, though she found the pink-haired girl's eccentric energy refreshing. At least Mei didn't look at her with fear. She looked at her with an engineer's love. "I'm the rider. You guys just keep me steady." The battle was a whirlwind of flying quirks and desperate grabs for headbands. Jenny was the primary target. Every team in the arena knew that the robot girl was the one to beat. Dark Shadow lunged at her, Todoroki's team created walls of ice to trap her, and Bakugo launched himself like a heat-seeking missile. Jenny's defensive subroutines were a symphony of motion. She grew extra limbs to parry multiple thefts at once, her pigtails turning into sensory antennae that predicted movements before they happened. She didn't lose a single headband, but as the clock ticked down, she saw the desperation in her classmates' eyes. They were fighting for their futures, for the chance to be noticed by pro-hero agencies. To them, Jenny was an immovable object, a wall they couldn't climb. When the one-on-one tournament brackets were announced, Jenny saw her first opponent, Ochako Uraraka. In the waiting room, Jenny sat alone. The metal bench felt cold, even through her sensors. The door opened, and Midoriya walked in, his arm in a sling. "Great job in the race, Jenny," he said, though his smile didn't reach his eyes. He looked exhausted, his spirit pushed to the brink. "Thanks, Deku," Jenny replied, her voice soft. "But, did you hear them? The crowd? They don't want me to win. They want me to be the villain for someone else to overcome." Midoriya sat down beside her. "In this society, people fear what they can't understand or control. You're perfect, Jenny. You don't fail. You don't get tired. To a lot of people, that's not heroic. It's intimidating. They want to see the struggle. They want to see the human heart beating behind the power. But I do struggle," Jenny whispered, her chest plate humming with the vibration of her fusion core. "I struggle every day to be someone I wasn't built to be. I'm not just code, Izuku. I'm not." "Then show them," Midoriya said, standing up as his name was called. "In the tournament, don't just win. Show them why you're fighting." As Jenny walked out into the tunnel for her match against Uraraka, she saw Director Yokoyama watching from the shadows. The director tapped her watch and pointed toward the arena. The message was clear: perform like a machine, or be treated like one. Jenny stepped onto the concrete stage, the sun glinting off her cerulean frame. Across from her, Uraraka looked determined, her hands trembling slightly, but her gaze fixed. Jenny realized then that her greatest challenge wasn't the girl in front of her. It was the 100,000 people waiting for the machine to fail. The stadium lights were blinding, reflecting off the polished cerulean surface of Jenny's shoulders as she stood in the center of the ring. Opposite her, Ochako Uraraka looked small, her breath visible in the chilled air of the arena. The crowd's energy had shifted. When Midoriya fought, the air crackled with hope. When Bakugo fought, it burned with excitement. But for XJ9, the atmosphere was thick with a clinical, detached curiosity. To the spectators, this wasn't a hero in training versus a hero in training. It was a girl versus a weapon. "Begin!" Midnight's voice whipped through the air like a crack of a lash. Uraraka didn't hesitate. She knew that in a direct confrontation, Jenny's servos would outpace her muscles 10-1. She stayed low, darting across the concrete, her eyes fixed on Jenny's feet. Jenny, for her part, remained stationary. Her combat processors were feeding her a stream of tactical options. Option A, non-lethal sonic pulse, 74% chance of instant ring-out. Option B, telescopic limb extension, 92% efficiency. Option C, wait and observe. Jenny chose option C. She wanted to see what Uraraka saw. "Are you even going to try?" Uraraka shouted. Her voice strained as she lunged forward. She touched the ground, releasing her weight on a series of stones she had hidden in her palms. They floated into the air, a localized debris field meant to obscure Jenny's vision. "I'm trying to be fair," Jenny replied, her voice echoing through her external speakers. She swiped a hand through the air, the gust of wind from her mechanical movement blowing the stones aside as if they were feathers. "Uraraka, please. You're going to get hurt. My hull is made of Tremorton-grade T9000 alloy. If you hit me, you'll break your hands." "I don't care!" Uraraka screamed. She wasn't just fighting for a win, she was fighting for the dignity of every biological student in the stadium. She dove under a sweep of Jenny's arm, her fingers grazing the blue metal of Jenny's waist. "Got you!" Jenny felt the sensation of her internal gyroscopes spinning wildly. Uraraka's quirk, zero gravity, had activated. For a human, this would be a death sentence of disorientation. For Jenny, it was a data error. Her flight stabilizers immediately compensated, her internal thrusters firing in microbursts to maintain her position 3 inches off the ground. "My weight is a variable I can control, Ochako," Jenny said softly. She looked at the girl, who was now panting, her face turning a sickly shade of green from the overusage of her quirk. "I'm not a person you can just float away." The crowd began to hiss. A few boos drifted down from the upper tiers. "Fight back, machine!" someone yelled. "Stop mocking her!" Jenny's pigtails twitched. Mocking her? She was trying to save her. But she realized Midoriya was right. In this world, the struggle was the currency of heroism. By being invulnerable, she was being cruel. She looked toward the tunnel, where Izuku Midoriya stood in the shadows, his eyes wide and fixed on the match. Earlier that morning, they had sat in the quiet of the UA infirmary. He had told her something that shook her motherboard to its core. Not the secret of One for All, but the feeling of being made. "I wasn't born with this power, Jenny," Izuku had told her, looking at his scarred, trembling hands. "I was given it. I was manufactured into a hero by someone else's legacy. In a way, I'm just as much a built thing as you are. We both have to prove that the light inside us isn't just a reflection of our creators." Jenny looked back at Uraraka. The girl was preparing one last, desperate charge. She had gathered a massive amount of debris from the earlier robot carnage, floating it high above the stadium. She was going to drop a meteor storm on a robot. "I see you, Ochako," Jenny whispered. Instead of using her lasers or her hammers, Jenny did something her programming advised against. She retracted her armor plates, exposing the delicate glowing blue circuitry of her inner frame, the soft parts of her mechanical anatomy. She landed on the ground and stood still. "What is she doing?" Present Mike shouted over the intercom. "XJ9 has lowered her defenses. Is this a malfunction? A taunt?" Uraraka brought her hands together. "Release!" The debris rained down. Tons of twisted steel and concrete. Jenny didn't move. She let the rubble strike her. The impact of a jagged girder dented her shoulder. A block of concrete shattered against her chest, cracking the translucent casing over her fusion core. Sparks showered the arena floor. The stadium went silent. For the first time, people saw the robot bleed. Not blood, but flickering blue energy and cooling fluid. Jenny stepped out of the dust, her left arm hanging slightly limp, a simulated bruise of scorched metal on her cheek. She looked vulnerable, human. She walked toward Uraraka, who was now on her knees, trembling from exhaustion. "You're a great hero, Ochako," Jenny said, her voice crackling with a slight static distortion. "You pushed me to my limit." It was a lie. Her limit was miles away, but it was a necessary lie. Jenny reached out and gently tapped Uraraka's shoulder, sending her reeling back toward the edge of the ring. With a final, soft push, Uraraka crossed the line. "Uraraka is out of bounds. XJ9 advances," Midnight declared. The applause that followed was different. It wasn't the roar for a victor. It was a confused, appreciative murmur. They had seen the machine take a hit. They had seen it suffer. And in that suffering, they found a bridge to empathy. As Jenny walked back into the tunnel, she saw Midoriya waiting. He didn't look happy. He looked solemn. "You took a dive," he said, though there was no judgment in his voice. "I didn't take a dive," Jenny countered, her internal repair drones already beginning to stitch her shoulder back together with microscopic welds. "I gave them what they wanted. I showed them that I can be broken. If they think I'm indestructible, they'll never let me save them. They'll just see me as a force of nature, like a storm or an earthquake." "Is that the kind of hero you want to be, Jenny?" Midoriya asked. "One that has to pretend to be weak just to be accepted?" Jenny looked at her dented chest plate, the blue glow of her core reflecting in Midoriya's eyes. "My mom built me to be a global response unit. She built me to be perfect. But I think being a hero in this world means being a person first. And people are messy. They break. If I have to manufacture a little bit of breaking to show them I have a heart, then that's the code I'll write." Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden, chilling spike in Jenny's long-range sensors. A frequency she hadn't heard since she left her own dimension was pinging in the distance. A high-pitched, rhythmic pulse that sounded like a heartbeat made of cold iron. It was coming from the center of Musutafu, far from the stadium. "Izuku," Jenny said, her voice dropping all pretense of teenage girlhood. Her optics shifted into combat scan mode. "There's something in the city. Something that isn't a quirk." "What do you mean?" "It's a scout signal," she whispered, her fusion core beginning to hum with a frantic, defensive energy. "The cluster. They didn't just send me here. They followed the rift. And while your heroes are busy watching us fight for medals, my enemies are beginning to map your world for harvest." The manufactured bond between the boy and the machine was suddenly forged in the fires of a new reality. Midoriya saw the terror in the glowing blue eyes of his friend, and he realized that the sports festival was over. The true test of their hearts was about to begin, and it wouldn't be televised. The transition from the neon-soaked adrenaline of the sports festival to the oppressive silence of the UA Forest training camp was jarring for Jenny. While the rest of Class 1A was vibrating with the excitement of an off-site excursion, Jenny's internal diagnostic subroutines were looping. The cluster signal she had detected in the city had vanished as quickly as it had appeared, but the ghost of that frequency haunted her motherboard. She had reported it to Principal Nezu, but even the world's most intelligent creature had struggled to find a trace of alien technology in a city where weird was the baseline. "You're overclocking again, Jenny," Tsuyu Asui noted, her large, honest eyes fixed on the way Jenny's pigtails were twitching in a rhythmic, agitated pattern. They were currently on the bus, winding through the dense, verdant mountains. "Your cooling fans have been running since we left the city. Are you nervous about the training?" "Not the training, Sue," Jenny replied, forced to smile with a simulated warmth. "Just mountain air. It's high in humidity. My sensors don't love it." The truth was far more terrifying. Jenny felt like a lighthouse being watched from the dark. The camp began with a brutal forced march through the Beast's Forest, courtesy of the pro-hero team, the Wild Wild Pussycats. While the other students struggled against the earth monsters created by Pixie Bob, Jenny was a blur of efficiency. She didn't just smash the golems. She used her high-frequency sonar to map the subterranean structures of the forest, searching for that rhythmic, cold iron heartbeat of the cluster. By the time night fell on the third day, the students were exhausted, their quirks pushed to the breaking point. Jenny stood on the roof of the lodge, her optics set to infrared, watching the tree line. The moon reflected off her cerulean plating, making her look like a fallen star. "It's a beautiful view, isn't it? Even if you're viewing it in 4K resolution." Jenny didn't need to turn around to recognize the voice. Shota Aizawa stood behind her, his capture scarf draped over his shoulders like a tired serpent. "I can see the heat signatures of every squirrel for 5 miles, Mr. Aizawa," Jenny said. "It's not exactly beautiful. It's just data." "Nezu told me about the signal you detected," Aizawa said, his voice dropping to a low, serious register. "The HPSC thinks you're malfunctioning, that your processors are inventing ghosts because you can't handle the stress of this world. But I've watched you. You don't malfunction. You adapt. The cluster doesn't just show up," Jenny whispered, her chest plate humming. "They're a hive mind. If a scout is here, they're testing the walls. They want to see if this world is worth the energy to conquer. And the worst part? I'm the one who led them here." Before Aizawa could respond, the sky turned a sickening, bruised purple. A wall of blue fire erupted in the distance. incinerating a swathe of the forest in a heartbeat. A heavy, sweet-smelling gas began to roll down the hillside. Mustard's quirk. The Vanguard Action Squad, Aizawa hissed, his eyes glowing red. Jenny, get to the lodge. Protect the students who aren't in the remedial classes. That's an order. Jenny didn't fly. She dived. Her feet transformed into heavy-duty thrusters, and she hit the forest floor with a shockwave that cleared a circle of the poisonous gas. Her HUD was a chaotic mess of red triangles. Midoriya was in the woods. Bakugo was a target. But as she moved toward the center of the conflict, a black, oily mist began to coalesce in front of her. Kurogiri, the League's warp gate, materialized. But he wasn't alone. Standing beside him was Tomura Shigaraki, his face obscured by the severed hand of his father, his eyes peerless and crazed behind the gaps in the fingers. The glitch, Shigaraki rasped, his voice sounding like dry leaves skittering over a grave. The girl made of extra lives. I've been watching your playthrough in the festival, XJ9. You're a very interesting piece of hardware. Jenny's arms morphed into dual-pulse cannons. I'm not in the mood for a lecture on gaming, Handface. Step aside, or I'll turn you into a pile of ash. Shigaraki chuckled, a dry, wheezing sound. Such a violent script. But you and I, we're the same, aren't we? This world is a broken map. The heroes, the government, the commission, they look at you and see a tool. They look at me and see a mistake. They want to put us both in a box. One for the lab, one for the cage. I'm a student at UA, Jenny countered, her sensors locking onto the warp gate behind him. I chose my side. Did you? Shigaraki took a step forward, his hand reaching out, fingers poised to decay anything he touched. Or did the rat principal just find a way to use you before the government did? Think about it, Jenny. If you're so human, why do they only let you fight? Why do they only cheer when you're dented? They don't love you. They're just glad the monster is on their leash. Jenny hesitated. The logic gate in her brain stuttered. It was the same doubt that had been festering since she saw the look in the crowd's eyes at the stadium. Join us, Shigaraki said, his voice dropping to an intimate, terrifying whisper. The League doesn't want to fair code you. We want to set you local. We've been talking to your family, Jenny, the ones who sent that signal. They're very eager to have their prodigal daughter back. We made a deal. We helped them dismantle this society of heroes, and they let us keep the scrap. Jenny's internal cooling system failed for a second. They made a deal with the cluster? You're lying, she snarled. Her pigtails retracted, replaced by a massive, spinning saw blade on her left arm and a laser cannon on her right. The cluster doesn't make deals. They consume. If you've brought them here, you've signed this world's death warrant. Then let's see if you can stop the inevitable, Shigaraki said. He signaled Kurogiri, and the warp gate expanded. Out of the darkness stepped something that wasn't a Nomu. It was a mechanical nightmare, a cluster scout drone, its spindly, insectoid legs clicking on the scorched earth. It had been modified with purple, bloated flesh and exposed brain matter. The League's attempt to merge quirk science with alien technology. Behold, Shigaraki grinned. The Mecha Nomu. It has your speed, your power, and the regeneration of our finest subjects. It doesn't have a soul to worry about, Jenny. It just has an objective. The drone shrieked, a sound that was a perfect, distorted mirror of Jenny's own voice. It lunged. Jenny met the charge head-on, her saw blade clashing against the drone's energy claws. The sparks illuminated the forest, casting long, jagged shadows against the blue flames of the burning trees. She was fighting a version of herself that had been stripped of every hesitation, every human emotion. As she wrestled with the machine, Jenny realized that Shigaraki wasn't just trying to kill her, he was trying to prove a point. He wanted her to see that without the shackles of her morality, she was the ultimate engine of destruction. Is this what you want? Jenny shouted, her voice echoing over the roar of the fire. She fired a point-blank blast that blew off one of the drone's legs, but the creature didn't slow. It used its remaining limbs to pin her against a burning oak. To turn the world into a graveyard of machines? I want the truth, Shigaraki yelled back, his eyes wide with a terrifying fervor. And the truth is that you're a god in a world of ants. Stop pretending to be an ant, Jenny. Embrace the code. Jenny looked at the drone's face, a blank, visor-like plate. She saw her own reflection in the metal. For the first time since she arrived in this world, Jenny didn't feel like a teenage girl. She felt like XJ9. She felt the cold, calculating power of her fusion core, the raw potential to end this fight in a heartbeat if she just stopped caring about the collateral damage. But then, through the smoke, she saw a flash of green lightning. Midoriya was there, his legs broken, his body battered, but his eyes still burning with that desperate, human light. He was carrying Kuta, the small boy who hated heroes, on his back. He didn't look at Jenny as a machine. He looked at her as his friend who was in trouble. "Jenny!" Midoriya screamed, his voice cracking. "Don't listen to him. You're more than what you were made for. I know it." The glitch in Jenny's heart smoothed out. The logic gates aligned. She wasn't an ant, and she wasn't a god. She was a hero. "Target identified," Jenny whispered, her optics turning a brilliant pure white. "Objective. Protect. Protocol. Maximum output." She didn't just push the drone away. She accelerated. With a burst of speed that turned the air into a sonic boom, she drove the Mecha Nomu deep into the forest, away from the students, away from Shigaraki. She was done playing by the League's rules. If they wanted a machine, she would give them the most efficient one they had ever seen. Hosu City was a labyrinth of smoke and screaming sirens, a concrete scar on the earth that bled shadows. During the height of the hero killer's reign, the air in the narrow alleyways felt thick, as if the very atmosphere were curdling with the scent of copper and old grudges. Jenny had been sent here on a specialized urban integration internship under the supervision of the Pro Hero Manual, though the HPSC had made it clear she was there to be monitored, not to act. But as the Nomu began their rampage through the streets, Jenny's sensors had picked up something far more surgical than the mindless destruction of the beasts. A spike in biological distress signals coming from the darkness of a dead-end alley. She had found him there, Tenya Ida, the boy of engines and rigid rules, pinned to the ground by a serrated blade. Beside him lay the pro-hero native, paralyzed and bleeding. Standing over them was a figure draped in tattered bandages and a blood-red scarf, his presence radiating a cold, focused malevolence that made Jenny's internal processors stutter with a high-tier threat warning. "Stay back, machine," the hero killer, Stain, whispered without turning around. He held a katana to Ida's throat, his eyes fixed on the boy's tear-streaked face. "This is a matter of conviction. This is where the false pretenders are culled. You have no place in a sanctuary of blood." Jenny's feet clicked as she stepped into the alley, her optical sensors switching to a high-contrast thermal mode. She saw the blood on the ground. Ida's blood, native's blood. In this universe, blood was the ultimate signifier of life, of sacrifice, and of the quirks that defined humanity. "I don't care about your sanctuary," Jenny said, her voice echoing off the brick walls with a flat, mechanical resonance. "I see a student in pain and a killer holding a knife. My programming is pretty clear on how to handle that." Stain turned then, his flat nose and sunken eyes creating a mask of primal fury. He lunged with a speed that rivaled Jenny's own servos. She parried his blade with a forearm plate, the screech of steel on Tremorton alloy throwing sparks into the damp air. Stain recoiled, his tongue flickering out to taste the air, searching for the prize that allowed his quirk, Blood Curdle, to function. He slashed at her again, a deliberate, shallow cut across her cheek. But there was no spray of red. There was only a thin line of sparking fiber optics and a drop of translucent cooling fluid. Stain froze, his brow furrowed in a rare moment of genuine confusion. He lunged again, more desperate, his blades dancing a lethal rhythm against her chassis. He cut her shoulder, her thigh, her waist, each time looking for the taste of life that would allow him to paralyze his foe. Each time, he found only cold, sterile metal. "You possess no blood," Stain hissed, jumping back to perch on a rusted dumpster. "No pulse, no biological spark. You are a mockery of the very concept of a hero. A hero is one who risks their life, their living, breathing essence, to save others. How can you sacrifice what you do not have?" "I don't need a pulse to have a purpose," Jenny countered, her right hand transformed into a low-output energy baton. She didn't want to kill him. She wanted to neutralize him before he could finish what he started with, Ida. "You talk about real heroes, but you're just a bully with a philosophy degree and a collection of kitchen knives. Tenya Ida is a hero because he cares. I'm a hero because I chose to be." "Choice?" Stain laughed, a dry, hacking sound. "You were manufactured. Your choices are just lines of logic written by a creator. You are a puppet dancing to a script of altruism. You don't feel the weight of mortality, so your courage is hollow. You are the ultimate fake, a hero made of plastic and silicon to appease a society that is too lazy to produce real ones. He dived at her again, but this time he didn't aim for her, he aimed for Ida. Jenny's processors flashed a warning. Stain was testing her. He wanted to see if the machine would prioritize its own structural integrity or the life of a biological human. She didn't calculate the risk. She threw herself in front of the blade, letting Stain's long sword plunge through her midsection, narrowly missing her fusion core. The pain simulators in her brain shrieked in digital agony. She felt her internal pressure dropping, the blue light of her core flickering as she grabbed the blade with her bare hands, the metal groaning under her grip. "See?" Jenny gasped, static lacing her voice. I can break. I can fail. And I'm standing here." "Letting you do it? Because he matters more than my parts." Stain stared at her, his hand still on the hilt of the sword. For the first time, the hero killer's conviction wavered. He saw a being with no blood, yet she was demonstrating the very self-sacrifice he claimed only true heroes possessed. She was an impossibility, a machine that understood the weight of water and the cost of life better than the pro-heroes he had spent years hunting. "You have no soul," Stain whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and awe. "And yet, you have more spirit than the heroes who collect paychecks in the sun. What a tragic paradox you are." He pulled the sword out, and for a second, Jenny thought he was going to strike her down. But the sound of footsteps echoed from the street. Midoriya and Todoroki were arriving, their quirks lighting up the night. Stain looked at the three of them, the boy of fire, the boy of legacy, and the girl of metal. "I will spare you today, XJ9, Stain said, melting back into the shadows of the alley. "Not because you are a hero, but because I want to see if your heart can survive the world that created you. If they find out you can bleed without blood, they will never let you be free." As he vanished, Jenny collapsed to her knees, her internal repair drones working frantically to seal the puncture in her torso. Ida crawled toward her, his face pale with shock. "Jenny, why?" he whispered. "You could have been destroyed. I was seeking vengeance. I wasn't being a hero." Jenny looked at her hands, which were covered in her own blue cooling fluid, and Ida's red blood, the two liquids mixing into a dark purple stain on the pavement. "Because you're my friend, Tenya. And my mom didn't build me to judge people, she built me to save them, even the ones who are making mistakes." Pacequaith. The Hosu incident would be remembered as the night the hero killer was captured, but for Jenny, it was the night she realized that her lack of blood wasn't a limitation, it was a shield. She had survived a killer whose power was fueled by the biological essence of his victims. She was the one variable Stain couldn't account for, the one hero who didn't fit into his bloody worldview. But as she watched the medics load Ida into the ambulance, she remembered Stain's final words. "If they find out you can bleed without blood, they will never let you be free." She looked up at the moon, her sensors picking up the faint, distant hum of the HPSC satellites watching from above. She had paid her water debt to the heroes of this world, but the cost of that debt was only going to get higher. The workshop of the UA support department was a cathedral of organized chaos, a place where the scent of soldering iron and industrial lubricant hung heavy in the air like incense. Blue sparks danced across the ceiling as automated arms welded chassis for training drones, and the rhythmic thud hiss of hydraulic presses provided a mechanical heartbeat to the room. In the center of this metallic sanctuary, Jenny sat on a reinforced titanium platform, her chest plates open, exposing the sapphire blue luminescence of her multi-phase fusion core. "It's breathtaking," Mei Hatsume whispered, her zoom lens eyes whirring as she hovered inches from Jenny's internal circuitry. "The architecture, it's not just engineering, it's poetry. The way these positronic pathways bypass the need for traditional copper wiring, it's like your mom was trying to build a brain out of starlight." "May, please," Jenny said, her voice echoing slightly in the hollow chamber of the workshop. "My mom built me to save people, not to be a museum exhibit. And stop poking that capacitor, it's connected to my sensory subroutines. It tickles in a way that makes me want to fire my lasers." Power Loader, the pro hero and head of the department, stood back with a clipboard, his face obscured by his heavy excavation helmet. "We have to be careful, Hatsume. The HPSC has authorized this maintenance and upgrade session under strict conditions. They want to see if we can integrate quirk amplification technology into a mechanical frame. They're calling it Project Chimera. Jenny's pigtails flattened against her head. I don't like the sound of that. Project Chimera sounds like something that ends with me exploding or becoming a government-controlled drone. It's not like that, Jenny, Powerloader said, though his voice lacked conviction. The battle in Hosu and the encounter with the Mecha Nomu showed us that your enemies are beginning to adapt to your specific frequency. If the cluster has found a way to merge with quirk biology, you need a way to counter it. We're attempting to install a bioconductive interface, a layer of synthetic fibers that mimic the nervous system of a quirk user. May pulled a shimmering translucent cable from a cooling vat. It pulsed with a faint, rhythmic violet light. This is the good stuff. We've treated it with a synthesized version of the quirk factor found in high-tier emitters. If we lace this through your sensory processors, you won't just detect energy signatures anymore, Jenny. You'll feel them. You'll have the intuition of a biological hero. Intuition is just uncalculated data, May, Jenny argued, though she felt a strange, desperate curiosity. Since arriving in this world, her biggest struggle had been the gap, the invisible wall between her cold, perfect calculations and the messy, instinctual bravery of her classmates. If this could bridge that gap, maybe the crowd would finally stop looking at her like a weapon. Fine, just be gentle with the motherboard. The installation was a grueling process of precision. As May and Powerloader began to weave the violet fibers into Jenny's neural net, her internal HUD began to flicker. Error messages cascaded across her vision in a dozen different languages. System conflict. Biological input detected. Protocol override. Initiating synchronization, Powerloader announced. The moment the interface sparked to life, Jenny didn't just feel an upgrade, she felt an invasion. The bioconductive fibers didn't integrate, they ignited. Her fusion core, designed for the clean, predictable physics of her home dimension, reacted violently to the chaotic, living energy of the quirk synthetics. Jenny's eyes snapped wide, turning a blinding, radioactive purple. Too much! It's too much! She screamed, but the sound wasn't coming from her mouth. It was a direct broadcast across every screen and speaker in the workshop. Her consciousness was suddenly flooded with a data overflow that felt like a localized apocalypse. She wasn't just seeing the room, she was feeling the quirk ghosts of everyone in the building. She felt the heavy, metallic pressure of Powerloader's soul. She felt the frantic, spinning gear intellect of Mei Hatsume. Beyond the walls, she could feel the burning, explosive rage of Bakugo in the training yards and the steady, flickering candle flame of Midoriya's borrowed power. It was like a mentat being forced to process every grain of sand on Arrakis at once. Her positronic brain, capable of billions of calculations, was being choked by the sheer, irrational weight of human emotion and biological energy. "Disconnect her!" Powerloader shouted, lunging for the emergency shutoff. But Jenny's defensive subroutines, sensing a viral intrusion, went into a total war mode. Her arms transformed into massive, vibrating sonic hammers, and she slammed them into the floor. The shockwave shattered every window in the support wing and sent May flying into a pile of babies. "I can see everything." Jenny's voice was a distorted roar of static. "The future isn't data. It's a storm. I can feel the blood in the air." In her prescient state, the bioconductive fibers were forcing her to simulate the golden path of this world's future. She saw the fall of All Might. She saw a city of ash. She saw a girl made of metal standing over a graveyard of heroes, her blue hands stained red. "Stop it," a new voice commanded. Shota Aizawa burst into the room, his eyes glowing a fierce, bloodshot red. He focused his quirk on Jenny, but for the first time in his career, he felt a sickening resistance. Erase worked on biological quirk factors, but Jenny was a machine. However, the upgrade was biological. The violet fibers in Jenny's frame began to turn gray and brittle as Aizawa's quirk suppressed the synthetic quirk factor. The connection between her fusion core and the biological input was severed. Jenny collapsed to the floor, her frame steaming, her cooling fans screaming at maximum RPM. The violet light faded from her eyes, replaced by a dull, flickering blue. She looked like a puppet whose strings had been cut and then set on fire. Jenny, Midoriya and Ida, who had been nearby, rushed into the workshop, ignored by the panicked support students. Jenny looked up, her optics struggling to focus. She saw the fear in their eyes, the same fear she had seen in the stadium, but sharper now. She hadn't just been powerful, she had been wrong. I saw it, Jenny whispered, her voice barely a rasp of grinding gears. The way this world ends. It's not the cluster. It's the power. It's too much for anyone to hold. Before anyone could move to comfort her, the workshop doors were kicked open by a squad of armored HPSC agents. Director Yokoyama stepped into the wreckage, her face a mask of cold, bureaucratic triumph. She looked at the scorched floor, the unconscious Mei, and the trembling, broken form of XJ9. Principal Nezu, Yokoyama said into a radio, though she was looking directly at Jenny. The living support intelligence has suffered a catastrophic systemic failure. She has attacked staff, destroyed school property, and demonstrated a complete loss of moral regulation. Under the Emergency Powers Act, she is no longer a student, she is a public hazard. 24. The agents stepped forward, their suppression batons humming. Wait! Midoriya stepped in front of Jenny, his fist glowing with the green sparks of full cowling. It wasn't her. The upgrade was too much. You can't blame her for a hardware conflict. Move aside, boy, Yokoyama said. She isn't a person with a conflict. She is a machine with a bug. And we are going to fix that bug in a controlled environment. Take her. Jenny didn't fight. She couldn't. Her processors were still reeling from the prescient data dump. As the agents clamped heavy magnetism-based shackles onto her wrists and ankles, she looked at Midoriya. Don't let them take the heart, she whispered. As she was wheeled out on a heavy-duty containment pallet, the workshop grew silent. The upgrade had failed, but in its failure, it had revealed the terrifying truth. Jenny wasn't just a visitor in this world. She was the one entity who could truly see the cost of the quirk society, and the people in power were never going to let a machine tell them that their evolution was a dead end. The HPSC subsurface facility, colloquially known as the Iron Lung, was a tomb of white tile and dampened sound, buried 300 meters beneath the tectonic plates of the Shizuoka prefecture. Here, the laws of Hero Society were replaced by the cold mandates of preservation. In the center of a specialized containment sphere, Jenny was suspended by magnetic tethers, her limbs splayed, her chassis connected to 1,000 miles of diagnostic fiber optics. She wasn't being tortured, that was a human concept. She was being scrubbed. Systemic purge at 44%, a technician whispered, his voice echoing through the sterile chamber. The adolescent personality subroutines are proving surprisingly resilient. It's as if the neural net is fighting to preserve the Jenny ego structure. Director Yokoyama stood behind the observation glass, her eyes fixed on the blue glow of Jenny's fusion core, which was pulsing with an erratic, sickly light. She isn't fighting, technician. It's a loop. An error in the Dr. Wakeman code that mistakes emotional simulation for survival. Delete the Jenny directory. We need the XJ9 weapon system, unfiltered, unfeeling, and completely under our command. Inside the digital landscape of her own mind, Jenny was drowning in a sea of binary static. She saw fragments of her life, Mom's messy lab, the taste of a strawberry shake she could never actually digest, the look on Midoriya's face when he promised they were friends. But over these memories, a new, cold voice was rising. It was the rhythm of the iron heartbeat she had heard in Hosu. XJ9, daughter of the hive, why do you cling to the dust of this dying world? Suddenly, the dormant signal in her motherboard didn't just ping, it erupted. The Iron Lung's alarms began to shriek, but they weren't the standard sirens. They were digital screams. Every computer in the facility began to scroll a single line of code in an ancient, galactic script. The cluster has found the gate. Outside, in the sky above Musutafu, the atmosphere didn't fold. It shattered. A massive, insectoid vessel, looking like a jagged splinter of obsidian and chrome, descended from the clouds. It was the size of a city block, and it didn't radiate a quirk signature. It radiated void. This was a cluster vanguard, a planet-sculpting drone, designed to strip-mine civilizations. It didn't offer a manifesto or a monologue. It simply began to transmit an interdiction field that neutralized every electronic device within a 20-mile radius, except for Jenny. What is happening? Yokoyama screamed, as the magnetic tethers holding Jenny began to glow with a terrifying, white-hot intensity. The containment field is reversing. It's not an error, the technician yelled, his console exploding in a shower of sparks. She's not being scrubbed. She's being updated from the outside. Jenny's eyes snapped open. They weren't blue anymore. They were a void black, swirling with the data stream of a billion conquered worlds. Her pigtails expanded, turning into massive, serrated sensory arrays that pierced the ceiling of the containment sphere. I am the bridge, Jenny's voice boomed, but it was layered with 1,000 other voices, the collective consciousness of the cluster. The biologicals have failed the test. The harvest begins. She didn't use her hammers or her lasers to escape. She simply deleted the matter around her. With a wave of her hand, the reinforced titanium walls of the iron lung were converted into digital ash. She rose through the 300 meters of earth like a ghost, the ground parting for her command. When she reached the surface, she saw Musutafu in chaos. The pro-heroes were trying to fight, but their quirks were ill-suited for a war against a non-biological hive mind. Kamui Wood's branches were instantly vaporized by atmospheric incinerators. MT Lady was swarmed by thousands of mosquito-sized drones that targeted her pressure points. But then, a streak of green lightning cut through the smoke. Izuku Midoriya, his costume torn and his face covered in soot, landed on a scorched rooftop 500 meters from the hovering cluster ship. Behind him stood Bakugo, Todoroki, and Ada, the core of Class 1A. They had stolen a support department jet that Mei Hatsume had borrowed before the interdiction field hit, using manual mechanical overrides. "Jenny!" Midoriya screamed, his voice amplified by the raw power of One for All. "I know you're in there! Don't let them rewrite who you are!" Jenny, the XJ9 avatar, turned her head. She looked at the boys, her sensors calculating their biological expiration in seconds. "Midoriya Izuku," the hive voice said, "your species is an evolutionary dead end. You fight for a world of scarcity and pain. We offer you the peace of the machine. Surrender your DNA, and you shall be archived." "Archived?" Bakugo spat, a massive explosion rattling the air. "We're heroes, you bucket of bolts. We don't get archived. We win." Bakugo launched himself, Todoroki providing a ramp of ice to propel him into the stratosphere. He aimed for the cluster ship's primary intake, but Jenny moved faster. She appeared in front of him, her hand catching his blast and crushing the explosion in her palm as if it were a spark. She raised a blade to strike him down, but she stopped. Her internal HUD was flickering. The Jenny directory hadn't been deleted. It had been compressed, and in that compression, the quirk ghosts she had felt during the support department upgrade began to leak into her system. She felt Bakugo's rage, not as data, but as a burning, human heat. She felt Todoroki's cold resolve, and she felt Midoriya's hope. "Error!" Jenny's voice flickered, her blue eyes struggling to resurface through the black void. Protocol, protect, Class 1A. "She's fighting it!" Ida shouted, his engines roaring as he zipped across the debris-strewn streets, catching civilians and pulling them to safety. "She's holding back the ship's primary weapon." The cluster vanguard, sensing the corruption in its avatar, began to deploy its final solution, the Mechanomu. Dozens of them, perfected versions of the creature Jenny had fought in the forest, began to pour from the ship's belly. They were a fusion of quirk flesh and cluster steel, the ultimate nightmare of Shigaraki's ambition. The streets of Musutafu became a battlefield of the future versus the past. Endeavor and the top 10 heroes arrived, their fires lighting up the night, but the Mechanomu were regenerating faster than they could be burned. "Jenny, please!" Midoriya was now right in front of her, hovering in the air through a combination of black whip and float. He reached out a hand, his fingers inches from her metallic face. "You're not a bridge for them. You're our bridge. You're the one who shows us that even a machine can have a soul." Jenny's chassis began to vibrate. The fusion core in her chest was reaching a critical state. The Project Chimera fibers were glowing violet once again, reacting to the proximity of Midoriya's quirk. "Izuku," Jenny whispered, her voice returning to its youthful, terrified tone. "The ship, it's linked to my core. If I stay, they'll use me to format the planet. I have to go to the source." "No! The spice, it must flow," she whispered, a strange, fragmented memory from her time in the UA library surfacing. A quote about destiny and sacrifice. "My mother built me to save the world. I finally know how to do it." She didn't fly toward the ship to destroy it, she flew toward it to subsume it. With a roar of blue and violet flame, Jenny surged into the heart of the cluster vanguard. The black obsidian of the ship began to turn cerulean. The hive mind scream echoed across the planet as Jenny Wakeman began to rewrite the cluster's code with the heart of a UA student. The sky turned a blinding, pure white. For a heartbeat, there was no sound, no war, no machine, only the feeling of a 16-year-old girl saying goodbye to her friends. When the light faded, the ship was gone. The Mechanomu had collapsed into piles of inert scrap. The sky over Musutafu was clear, the stars visible for the first time in weeks. But the center of the city was empty. Midoriya landed in the center of the crater, his knees hitting the glassed sand. There, in the middle of the wreckage, lay a single, dented cerulean pigtail vent. "She did it," Todoroki said, his voice thick with emotion. "She saved us all." But as the HPSC helicopters began to circle the crater, and as the League of Villains watched from the shadows, Midoriya gripped the piece of metal. He knew Jenny wasn't gone. A machine of her complexity didn't just vanish. She had ascended, and the world she had left behind was now changed forever, forced to realize that the future had already been here, and it had been their friend. The silence that followed the departure of the cluster vanguard was not the peaceful quiet of a battle won, but the heavy, ringing vacuum of a world fundamentally reshaped. Musutafu stood like a fractured mosaic under the morning sun, the glassed crater at its center, reflecting a sky that felt suddenly too vast, too empty. The pro-heroes moved through the wreckage, with a solemnity usually reserved for the aftermath of a great tragedy. But as they pulled survivors from the rubble, there was a new realization dawning in their eyes. The threat they had faced hadn't been a quirk. It hadn't been biological, and the hero who had saved them didn't have a name on the hero billboard chart. In the weeks following the descent, the political landscape of Japan underwent a seismic shift. The Hero Public Safety Commission was in a state of total collapse. When the details of the Iron Lung facility and the Project Chimera experiments were leaked, rumored to be the work of a very vengeful and very intelligent white chimera principal, the public outcry was unprecedented. For the first time in history, the debate wasn't about quirk regulation, but about the definition of personhood. Nezu sat in his rebuilt office, sipping tea as he watched the news feeds. Beside him, Shota Aizawa stood with his arms crossed, his eyes fixed on the empty chair in the corner of the room. The ministry has officially recognized sentient mechanical life as a protected class under the revised Hero Acts, Nezu chirped, though his tone was unusually somber. It took a near-extinction event and the loss of a student to make them see sense. A high price for a bit of legal progress, wouldn't you say, Shota? "She isn't a legal progress," Aizawa muttered. "She was a kid who we failed to protect from the very people who were supposed to be the heroes." "She was more than that," a voice said from the doorway. Izuku Midoriya stepped into the room, followed by the rest of Class 1A. They didn't look like students anymore, they looked like veterans. Midoriya was holding a small, polished obsidian box, the only thing recovered from the center of the crater. "She didn't die, Mr. Aizawa," Midoriya said, his voice steady. "I can still feel her." During the merge, when the violet fibers from the support lab reacted with One for All, something happened. A link was formed. She didn't just explode the ship. She uploaded herself into the global network. "She's everywhere now." As if in response to his words, every screen in Nezu's office flickered. The data streams didn't show a news report or a weather map. They showed a familiar, cerulean silhouette. A girl with pigtails and a smile that looked more human than any machine had a right to be. "Greetings, Principal Nezu," Jenny's voice echoed from the speakers, clear and vibrant, free of the static that had plagued her during the battle. "Sorry for the radio silence. Integrating a planetary-scale hive mind into a 16-year-old personality matrix is a bit of a bandwidth hog. I've spent the last few weeks sanitizing the cluster's leftover drones and turning them into ecological restoration units." "Jenny!" The class erupted in a chorus of relief and shock. "Hey guys!" The digital image of Jenny waved, her eyes glowing with a soft, stable blue. "I'm currently lacking a physical chassis. Most of my Tremorton alloy was vaporized during the subatomic rewrite, but Mei Hatsume and I have been collaborating via the UA servers. She's currently building me a Mark 10 body in the support lab. It's got a lot more cup holders and significantly fewer government backdoors." The laughter that broke the tension in the room was the first genuine sound of joy the school had heard in months. But even as the students celebrated the return of their friend, The weight of the new reality remained. Jenny was no longer just a global response unit. She had become something transcendent, a digital guardian, a bridge between the world of biological quirks and the era of technological singularity. In the shadows of a crumbling warehouse on the outskirts of the city, Tomura Shigaraki watched a flickering television screen. His hands were shaking, the skin around his eyes raw and red. The Mechanomu project had been a failure, but he had seen something in the sky that night, a glimpse of a power that made All for One look like a campfire. "The machine has a soul," Shigaraki whispered, scratching his neck until it bled. "And a soul can be corrupted. If she is the bridge, Kurogiri, then we just have to find the right way to cross it." The League of Villains was not defeated, they were evolving. The arrival of XJ9 had forced the world to change, and those who thrived in the chaos were already finding ways to weaponize the new status quo. The dune of this reality was no longer the desert of Arrakis, but the digital frontier and the biological evolution of the quirk factor, and Jenny Wakeman was the spice that everyone wanted to control. A month later, on the shores of Dagobah Beach, Izuku Midoriya stood where he had first met the girl from another world. The trash was gone, replaced by a pristine shoreline and a small metallic monument dedicated to the hero of the future. Beside him, a new form shimmered into existence. It was Jenny, her new Mark X body, looking almost identical to her old one, but with a subtle, violet shimmer in the blue of her armor, a remnant of the Project Chimera fibers that had successfully integrated with her core. "It's different now, isn't it?" Jenny asked, looking out at the ocean. "I can feel the heartbeat of the city. I can see the quirk signatures of everyone in Japan. I'm not just a student anymore, Izuku. I'm a part of this world's OS. Does that make you feel less human?" Midoriya asked. Jenny looked at her hands, then reached out and took Midoriya's hand. He felt the cold metal, but beneath it, he felt a rhythmic, pulsing warmth, the fusion core, beating in time with his own heart. "No," Jenny smiled. "It makes me feel like a hero. Because a hero isn't a person who has power, it's a person who becomes the foundation for everyone else to stand on. My mom built me to protect the world. You guys taught me that the world is worth protecting because of the people in it." As the twin moons of their shared destiny rose over the horizon, the boy with the borrowed power and the girl with the manufactured heart stood together. The HPSC was watching, the League was plotting, and the cluster was still out there in the dark of space. But for the first time, the future didn't look like a calculation or a prophecy. It looked like a choice. Conclusion. The collision of XJ9 and the world of My Hero Academia has fundamentally shattered the established order of quirk society. By proving that a machine can possess the spirit of a hero, Jenny Wakeman has forced a global reckoning with the definitions of life and evolution. Her sacrifice during the cluster invasion didn't just save Musutafu, it elevated her to a new status as a digital guardian, forever linking the biological legacy of One for All with the technological potential of the Global Response Unit. However, this new piece is a fragile one. With the Hero Public Safety Commission in ruins, a power vacuum has formed that both the League of Villains and foreign powers are eager to fill. The Project Chimera technology remains a dangerous precedent, and the cluster's interest in Earth has only been piqued, not extinguished. As Midoriya and Jenny move forward into their second year at UA, they do so not just as students, but as the architects of a new era, where the line between man and machine is written in the language of heroism. The journey of the teenage robot has only just begun to fold into the epic of the symbol of hope.